to the Minister of Intelligence. Thank you for being with us. And I'd like to begin with the first question because it's a week after the last campaign of Shield and Arrow. And no doubt that the IDF and defense forces showed extraordinary capabilities, and there's really no point even expanding on them. But the main question at the end of the day, the major enemy is the Hamas in Gaza. And what is our strategic view vis-a-vis the Hamas? Because in recent years, the Hamas has tried to impose on us a sort of reverse isolationism. On the one hand, maintaining the status quo in the West Bank, thanks, to allow commodities to flow through in and out, but also doing other things in Judea and Samaria and allowing other things to enter the state of Israel to a threat. What is the strategy? So no doubt that we have concluded a campaign which was very successful of Shield and Arrow, where we changed everything that was the reality before then and returned the force of deterrence to the state of Israel. For us, we confirmed that we will determine when and how and the goals that we will set in every campaign and the military operation. And I think that it's clear to everybody that these targeted killings are also the key for our for the participation in the Hamas in recent campaign. And we determined the target to take out the leadership of the jihad in Gaza. That's what happened. An operation that was precise by the ISA, by the military, by the IDF. And that is the best way. Now, in regards to strategy, we here have created an understanding for everyone, and this is strategy. So, yeah, obviously, within the campaign itself, the injury was to the leadership of the jihad, but the message that we convey was conveyed clearly. And, of course, the message is the ability of all of the organizations, not only that when we try to harm Israel, not only when you manage, but when you try, we convey the message to everybody, then we can get to anybody who dares to strike against Israel. That is the message, and it worked well, as we saw it, and the campaign, in fact, met its objectives. If we take this to a broader perspective, because at the end of the day, you can't ignore the fact that in recent months, the image has been established now that the state of Israel strategically is very, very bad because of things happening here politically, because the Prime Minister hasn't succeeded in meeting President Biden, because there are conflicts between us and the American government. And this seems that we are weakened, and our enemies may see us weakened. For example, the attempted, in Megiddo attack. So, do you see any questions for the strategic combined forces of the State of Israel in the future with this damage to our reputation? And how can this work vis-a-vis Iran? Well, let's begin with the fact that the relationship between the U.S. and Israel is very, very good. I just came back from Washington and I met there with members of Congress, among them, of course, head of the Security Committee of Congress, which just a week ago helped us and funded the Iron Dome cost. I would say that in this point, our common interests, those between the U.S. and Israel, our common interests are very, very closely held. The Prime Minister Netanyahu will get to Washington very soon. I say this very certainly and assuredly, certainly also because I know that the relationship between Israel and the U.S. is not a personal matter between one person and the next, but rather an understanding that we are the best friends to the state of Israel, to the United States of America here in the region, and the fact that we rely on this partnership and have so for many, many years, as you can see throughout all of the various presidents of the United States. We can see this in all of the prime ministers of Israel. We see we maintain this relationship. Maybe it's a sort of like a scoop that the prime minister will get to Washington very soon, and that's very, very important because at the end of the day, there's no substitute for direct contact between state leaders. But if we look at this more broadly, and we talked about this earlier, the Iran, I questioned you about this. In recent days, we can see the Iranians basically establishing their stance vis-a-vis the Arab world. In Jordan, we can see remarks being made to Egypt, and concurrently, Assad has just recently been involved in talks, and we can see, an image talks 1,000 words. We say Assad next to MBS, and we can say that the entire region is changing. So Iran is changing. Syria, Iran is trying to warm its relationships with the other Arab states in the Middle East, relationships and countries that we have our own relationships with some of them. So how do you see the Iran threat, and how do you see the last, maneuvers by Iran? For those who know the great details and the history of conflicts, whether it's the Saudis and the Iranis, it's clear to all that this won't be sustainable over time. There are problems there that are much more profound than the necessities of the day, the ability to, what you called it, spreading smiles across the room? You said Iran was spreading smiles. Okay. At the end of the day, these smiles won't be sustainable. But here, this has nothing to do with our capability to continue to push forward with the Abraham Accords and extend them to the Saudis. I believe that will happen soon, and develop more partnerships with other countries that will join the Abraham Accords with the same clear shared interests involved, that with the clear axis of evil that we all face, which is Iran, they all have a shared interest to work with us. And Iran at the moment, in that regard, does constitute a threat not only against the state of Israel and the Middle East, but rather the Iranians' desire to have a nuclear armament is just one part of the overall complexity that is, at the end of the day, something that is a takeover and an attempt where the Shia is trying to basically gain ground with the other countries and to eliminate the state of Israel. This is the only country that says very clearly that they want to eliminate the state of Israel, Iran. And so that is a scenario that we're constantly preparing for, and we will, of course, not enable that atmosphere that may harm us. We have our ways, we have good friends and partnerships and across the aisle from countries that are friendly to Israel. We also have now relationships with countries that are near Iran, neighbors of Iran. And there I believe that the policy that we are leading in terms of security and the state's need are the same strategy that you talked about. I mean, you asked me what is right to do in order to lead the state of Israel to become to be as safe as possible in whatever scenario. And here I would like to tell you that the additional way, in addition to the state measures and security measures, has to do with the cultural element of bringing, the Iranian population closer to us. This has begun with Reza Pahlavi, the heir, and this is efforts were made with him, and now other efforts are also made, and you'll see now on social media, for example, in Iran, with the population that is screaming out only to bring down the Ayatollah regime that is so bad for them, that is murdering day and night young people. Just protesters have been killed, and but now they're shooting not only protesters, we're killing women, shooting them in their genitalia, their eyes, as someone to show that they were mock them as protesters, and so that they won't be able to be part of any society, not socially, not economically. I can tell you that there are horrible testimonies, and I'm sorry that it's not only an economic level of complexity that is harmful for society, and it's not only a society that really has a lot of minorities that are suffering very, very terribly from a very cruel regime that violates basic human rights in the most clear way. way, and the hypocrisy of Iran in the UN. Just last week, they appointed the ambassador of Iran to be head of the UN committee for the Social Committee for Human Rights, just to show you that we as a society have to know to come together in the right way in order to deal with those factors that are so harmful. And I believe that right now we will be successful in starting things from the bottom up, so to speak, from the field, from this unity between people, from the Koresh agreement. I, enlisted to that cause as well in the Congress. Various people, Christians who love Israel, and the lobby and the Congress. And when I stated there that I believe that the Jews and Christians have to work together with the Iranian people in order to save them from this horrific and murderous regime. So I believe that everything that is happening that can be promoted can be led forward through legislation in Europe as well, and also in all of the other places, to stop the Iranis and to define them as a terrorist organization, because they are managing themselves as a collective terrorist organization that goes against the values of not only Israel but also the entire world. We can see the Houthi in Yemen, we can see this in the Hezbollah, we can see this with the jihad, in which they tried to operate the jihad, and then they got hit hard in the recent campaign. And here we need to create this clarity to everybody that together we can work in order to replace this harsh, regime. So let's maybe think together. What would happen on the day in which the Ayatollah regime was replaced with another democratic government within Iran that will be elected by the Iranian people? I think that would be the best way for anybody in all sides involved. So if we're talking about strategy, that should be our strategy. So maybe we should expand a little bit, because an article was published a few days ago that the Jewish people and the Iranian people can fight their regimes together. So what do you think needs to be, and you've explained what needs to be done in your opinion, but what is the vision, what is the broad view? Because you said with the air, just several, and we also met in Washington, but before that as well. Yes, and he was here even in Israel. Can you imagine what a thrill that was, that we were standing at the Western Wall together on the Holocaust Memorial Day, and you can see the successors of Koresh that are coming for the first time and standing with me at the Western Wall in a moment of silence. And he comes with me to basically, console the family of the bereaved, and when the Iranian government are the ones that have killed these people, and he consoles their families. So you can see all of this, that the time has come. It's like a closing, full closure. From the far, far ancient history, we see the results of it today in a real collaboration that will give hope for those same young people, those girls in school that are standing up and are joining the protests, and those same women like Masa Amini, a 22-year-old woman, a Kurdish Iranian woman, is killed because she didn't, wear her hijab properly. It's something that we as the Jewish people, we in the State of Israel, in our democratic country, we can't just keep silent about, apart from the fact that there's a real partnership here with the desire to release ourselves from our own threat and the threat to society in Iran. And I think here for this we have to enlist all of the human rights organizations around the world in order to take the right step here against the murderous Ayatollah regime and turn it into an organization of terror, to increase sanctions against them and also increase our capability in order to deal again with this regime. no doubt that the protests in Rajan, they're still ongoing, despite the fact that, yes, although they represent something profoundly different about the Iranian people, the young people, the women, the girls. Many of them know what their fate will be, and they still go and protest. And here this raises the question. There's no doubt that we need to help them, and we want to help them, and it maybe should be an interest of all of us to fight the Ayatollah regime, but in the most simple fashion. Isn't it a bit naive to think that we, the West, is going to enlist now and lead this great change? I mean, oftentimes that step is not taken. It's certainly not something that happens, overnight. It requires years and years of collaboration, decades. I think that there is something good about innocence, but I don't think it's naivete. I think that in this regard, it's a bit, thinking outside the box and thinking a bit differently and leading an approach that I believe is more correct, in addition to all the other things that are being done. I think that the international arena does not do enough and has to do more, and I think that we will work in order to demand that, in fact, it does move forward. But for me, when we look at all of the other, revolutions, and there's a broad array of them, how protests in the world has changed public agenda, toppled regimes. We see this in our neighborhood. We see this in the Soviet Union, that, you woke up one day and you never imagined that there wouldn't be a USSR, but there suddenly wasn't. So it's happened throughout history, and I really do believe that it's even closer than we can imagine. So before my penultimate question will be, okay, what steps do we need to take? What are the next steps that the ministry is going to take? Whatever you can tell us amongst friends, of course. There are many good things, but I am well known, part being Minister of Intel. I talk about things after they're done and not before. And so I really do believe that there will be many more important and right things that we will be able to do in order to push forward with these issues. Obviously, the Abraham Accords are strategically important to the State of Israel. How do you see that within the context of the Iranian threat and the other things, Azerbaijan, the other elements that have occurred just recently? Yes. Yeah. Yes, we have the deputy ambassador, and we have the, yes, and from Azerbaijan, the official, of course, we have, of course, an amazing relationship and a remarkable relationship, very important. And I, of course, will have the honor to represent the government on the National Day this Wednesday with the embassy, and we certainly have, yeah. I mean, it's a new ambassador. We have to say, welcome. We should welcome him. They opened an Azerbaijan consulate in Israel. And that's exactly one of the changes of the required changes, the important changes. There is a minority of maybe 20 million. Some people say that there's an Azeri minority in Iran. 20 million, somebody said that's an underestimate in terms of the number. And you can see that there's an inability of minorities in Iran to express themselves, their culture, their nationality, to be represented in some form or another. And you can see this across the board in Iran. Even the Baha'i religion is banned. They simply harm very severely their minorities in every way. And here I tell you, from understanding these processes, that at the end of the day, you cannot, with force of arms, with murderous intent, manage a country. And I think that there will be a required awakening, and at the end of the day, we'll see a different chapter in history. And we have to understand that this history was until recently with the relationship with Iran and Israel. I mean, I can tell you that when the heir, Reza Pahlavi, came here. We also conducted meetings with the Jewish Iranian community. It was enormously thrilling. It was moving. People, were brought to tears. Academians were thrilled at the opportunity. Every, level of our society was delighted, and I was surprised to see how Jewish Iranians, how much they love Iran, how much they remember Iran, and with love, how many positive things they have to say about the Irani people, and how sad it is to think that just an extreme, murderous, fanatical regime stopping for the country from realizing its potential.
Just think how we in the State of Israel can offer solutions and answers for the population there. Instead, the regime is actually pulling the rivers according to its own wishes and undermines Iranian minorities in severe ways. So the problems in Iran are not merely economic. When it comes to various issues pertaining to their ability in a very offensive way to harm themselves and the population, to undermine their groundwater, air pollution. You're looking across the board and see the damage. How long will that continue to be that way? And that's the question to ask, because I believe their time is running out, and we can only help in that. We need to ask ourselves, how long will this interview take place? It cannot take longer than it had already taken. We've already exceeded the time. It went fast. Well, time flies fast when you're having fun. So thank you for your time. No doubt I could truly relate to their creativity. Iran is definitely the most significant strategic challenge for the State of Israel, but you have to see how you mobilize all the different aspects, military, economic, and otherwise, to fight against it. Thank you very much.